All right, Alexander, let's talk about the G20 meeting that took place in Brazil. What are your thoughts about the meeting? Why are we even having G20s anymore? I really don't understand the purpose of the G20 format, to be quite honest. The G7 format, what used to be the G8, the G7 format to me is now dead. The G20, I don't think it really has much of a purpose. There was a communique that came out prepared before the meeting took place. But the communique that was approved is not to the liking of the United States and the collective West, because it leaves out much of Ukraine and demonizing Russia. But that's the communique that came out. And the rest of the G20 meeting was basically Biden getting lost and Stammer making a complete fool of himself in front of the Chinese. What are your thoughts on the G20 meeting in Brazil?
I would not be surprised if this turns out to be the last G20 meeting, because they have completely lost their relevance. If you compare the level of decision-making that was made 3 weeks ago in Kazan when the BRICS met, and you compare that with what's happened at the G20, nothing has happened that is at all interesting or important at the G20. There's been no major decision. Nothing has been taken further or forward. The G20 had its brief moment around the time of the financial crisis in 2008. At that time, all the major powers around the world, China, Russia, the United States, the Western powers, were all talking to each other. They were all supposedly working together to agree on action to stabilize the world economy, and they were all going to do it together. No one was challenging the dollar at that time, or at least not openly so. Now the world is completely different. We see that economic blocks, let's call them that, or trading groups are emerging, that the Western powers no longer are able to dictate to the others. So the G20 has lost its relevance. But that doesn't mean that this particular meeting was not interesting in some ways. Firstly, Biden failed to turn up for the last photo shoot. Now, the point about that is he got lost and he was wandering around and nobody quite knows.
The reports are that there was just to say there was a community note in the video of Biden getting lost, and it says that he was stuck in a meeting with Trudeau, which I think makes it even worse.
Well, absolutely.
It makes the whole situation even worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. The point is that the Brazilian organizers didn't wait for him. And whatever the reason, that is pretty astonishing. And, you can argue around that. But to me, frankly, that looks like a tremendous snub. The Brazilians who, organizing this big meeting, they didn't want the president of the United States to be in the group photo, or at least, or rather not perhaps that they didn't want it, but they weren't bothered by the fact that he wasn't in the group photo. That to me, that looks like
that community note makes it worse, because what it tells me is that they have the group photo, and you would think that someone would call into the people doing the group photo, and they'd say, "Wait a minute, Biden is still in a meeting with Justin Trudeau. Hold on for 10 minutes. Yeah. They'll be there." And the Brazilians said, "We don't care. Just do the photo."
Absolutely. So, it's pretty astonishing, and that should be done to the president of the United States. But, it happened. And, of course, we all saw the extraordinary exchange between Xi Jinping and Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer comes along, lectures Xi Jinping about protests in Hong Kong and all of that. Xi Jinping looks at him with a totally impassive face. There's a sort of slight brush of the hands, which is supposed to be a handshake. You could obviously see that Xi Jinping says to himself, "I'm not going to waste any more time with this person. He is of no interest to me." It was awful, actually. It was cruel, if I have to say. So there's that. But the other thing is a communique which really didn't say very much about anything very much, comes out with an utterly anodyne comment about Ukraine. So they managed, I think, 7 paragraphs at the previous G20 meeting in Delhi. That was incredibly heavily, brokered by India, which is the host. India very embarrassed about the whole thing, under an awful lot of pressure. Talk from the West at that time that Modi was involved in conducting assassinations of Sikh leaders in the United States and Canada and that sort of thing. So he was being put under an enormous amount of pressure. Even then, the West was very unhappy with the final statement. But this time, even that is then cut back massively. No condemnation of Russia, no criticism of any specific Russian action, the attacks on the energy system, anything of that kind. Just comments about wanting peace and the fact that there's a lot of suffering happening in Ukraine. A completely innocuous statement, one that the Russians were quite happy to sign. They were represented, by the way, by Lavrov. Putin wisely stayed away, in my opinion, not because he's worried that the Brazilians would arrest him, but because he's worried that if he went to Brazil, well, it's a long way, crosses American and Western controlled airspace. Who knows what might happen? But putting all that aside, Lavrov was there. Lavrov would have no difficulty signing this statement. The West furious about it. And again, telling each other we have to agree because otherwise we won't get any final statement at all, which shows that the major countries of the global majority, the BRIC states, the Brazilians, the Indians, the Chinese, all of the others, the Saudis, that they all said, look, it's either this or nothing. So that tells you that the global South countries, the global majority countries, are now indicating quite clearly that they are not prepared to accept Western dictation on issues like this kind. They're prepared to walk away rather than do so. And the West, terrified of that happening, because, of course, it would expose even further the extent of their own isolation and powerlessness. So there it is. We get a final statement that basically shows the waning power of the West and its increasing isolation.
Yeah, represented in Joe Biden.
Yeah,
and Justin Trudeau.
By
the way, I think Maloney was also left out of the photo. Yeah, I mean, why go on with the G20 outside of the bilateral meetings? The rest of the G20 event is just a circus. I mean, it's good for social media posts, for laughs, for memes. But I mean, there's no. I don't see what is the purpose of what are they trying to achieve at these G20 meetings that you just can't achieve by having a bilateral meeting with the world leader? I mean, what's the purpose of this thing?
Well, it has no purpose.
Just get rid of it.
It has no purpose. It's just a legacy institution left over from the peak period of globalization, whose days are done. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So, do you think that we're going to have another G20 next year? Next coming years?
Perhaps.
Or is BRICS just going to take it over?
But gradually the BRICS is going to take it over, and eventually fewer and fewer of the top leaders are going to go, and eventually the whole thing will sputter out because nobody outside the West will be interested in hosting it.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Any other thoughts on the events that happened in Brazil?
What this event demonstrates, again, is the deep unpopularity of Joe Biden within the wider global community. That's the first thing to say. The second is, again, the extent to which Ukraine and the Middle East have isolated the West. I don't know that they yet fully grasp the extent of it, but they have become isolated. They become unpopular. And the days when they could do all of these things and they were so powerful that everybody had to go along with what they wanted are now clearly over.
Yeah, I wonder if Biden and his team understand that no one likes them.
No.
Like the entire outside of the European leaders who are just vassal states, they're just puppets and vassals. The rest of the world just is so happy that Biden is leaving.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah. Anyway, I think that was probably the big event at the G20. I wouldn't be surprised if they were having parties.
Yeah.
Obviously not inviting Biden, but if they were having parties celebrating the fact that they're not going to be dealing with a Biden administration anymore. All right, that's the video. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video. The link to the Duran shop is in the description box down below. Take care.